And everybody. My name's Lavinia and I'm the director from the M Word, and I'm joined as ever by the lovely Yasmin, our social media manager. Welcome, Yasmin, yet again. Today we are talking about internalizing, and the reason why we've chosen this subject is because many people do actually internalize a lot of issues. And I thought it would be quite useful to have, of course, Yasmin's opinions and experiences, being a lot younger than me, but also thinking about how that impacts in a variety of ways. So I suppose the first question for me, Yasmin, thinking about it for the others who are watching, is, what does internalizing mean for you? For your experiences? I mean, I'm sure there's lots and lots of experiences, but what does it mean for you if you're internalizing? And the reason why I asked this of Yasmin is because she's very good at doing this. So go for it. What do you think?
Am I?
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back with a question. What does that word mean?
So internalizing, you see already we've got a lovely point here. So internalizing, when we are internalizing things, we tend to kind of shut down to the outside world and we are looking at and thinking about things, and we don't tend to show the world what we're thinking or what we're feeling. It's very hidden behind a mask, but there's more to it than just the masking. Rather than the masking kind of like shutting down where you're just not doing anything, you're just making out that everything's fine, there is a real thinking and feeling processing going on in this internalizing of things. So for example, when Yasmin will start often with a line of a question and then she'll say, never mind. And I'm on the cliffhanger of, oh, she said something that's really important. Please tell me what it is. And what you get is Yasmin going, no, it's fine, it's nothing, it's irrelevant. And then she will just shut up and not say anything else for the next 4 hours. And you're like, I know this is a big thing. What the hell was that all about? And you cannot draw her on them. But it is quite clear the cogs are going. And when you are internalizing, particularly from an autistic perspective, that level of internalizing is never a good sign, because it means that you're desperately trying to work it out. But actually, with the negativity that's going on, it can actually get worse, and invariably does. So, would you like me to ask you the question again as to how often you think this?
I'm up to speed.
Cool.
I find it very interesting because I think I do that, but I also do like a half-heart version of it as well, where if I ask you a question and it seems like a really specific targeted question, it's because I want you to ask me that question. Which sounds really bad.
Could you just make that infinitely easier then and just ask me to ask you the question?
My clarification is, well, no, because then that seems really rude. But when it's like when you bump into somebody and you ask, are you okay? You expect them to ask it back. So I can't straight out go, will you ask me this question? Because I want to talk about it. Because A, I don't know, I wouldn't do that. And B, I feel like that's kind of rude to say, I don't need you specifically as a person, but could you just say this line of the script and then I'll continue? It's fine. I don't need that. So I'll ask you the question, and then normally most people's reactions is, what about you? So then it's like, okay, I've eased myself into what I need to say. But no, I do that.
Yeah, it doesn't always follow suit that you do that though, because I'll say something like, why are you asking me? Is this a worry?
But then I worry that I shouldn't say what I'm thinking. I think that's the thing. There's so many variables. Like, if you do say it back, because, I've managed to guilt trip you into asking it back, sometimes I'm suddenly like, oh no, I think this is like too much of a serious conversation or too much of a sensitive conversation. I'm like, backtrack. And then I'm like, oh yeah, but I've really made a point now. It's like you've let off a flare and then gone, actually, never mind, the ship's not sinking. Don't worry about it. Move on. And it's like, it's a bit late. It's a bit
There's
late
something,
and you're like, oh God, I've really got to say it.
but there's something really interesting in that understanding, isn't there? Because what you're telling me suggests that there is a bit of anxiety, and also telling me that you are really concerned about being judged. So can you help us out a bit more with our understanding? What do you worry about the judgment?
I think sometimes it's a fact that I worry that people are going to see it as an inappropriate conversation, if that makes sense. Because, there's certain things you just don't talk about, and we're trying really hard to kind of break that cycle. But it's still like, is this question too intimate? Or like, so then I'm worrying about what other people are going to say. Because, what I might perceive as a really intimate question, and I don't want to answer that, somebody else might be like, oh yeah, I could write an entire brochure on why I feel this, and it's really hard to tell what kind of person you're talking to until you're in the situation. Because, I've had people in the past say, oh, you're really lucky to be able to be so open and speak about your emotions. And I'm like, you find that hard? So I still sometimes wonder if I've asked the wrong person, because they might suddenly think that's a really intimate question. I don't want to talk about this. And then the conversation is awkward. So there's not much you can do after that, isn't it? You've kind of ruined it. And it's like, oh.
I think as well, for me as a clinician, one of the things that I learned very early on was that there's a particular phrase that we resort to when we're feeling quite anxious, but we're trying to explain ourselves. And the phrase is, I know this sounds silly, but, and I learned very early on, do you know what? That's the golden nugget. That's what the whole issue is invariably around. If I ignore that, I'm going to be like every other clinician who becomes very dismissive. And it is when we say, I know this sounds silly, but the immediate reaction for most people is to go, oh, right, so you think it's silly, so it must be silly. So therefore, move on. We don't need to explore that. And I've heard over and over and over and over again to, forever, so many clients going, you really listened. And I go, what did I listen to? Because the bit that I've picked up on is the one that you told me. It sounds really silly. And when you kind of look at that, they go, oh, yeah, well, it does sound silly. It's like, in whose book? Because actually, this silly thought has been permeating around your body, your brain cells, for weeks, for months, for years. And it is a very, very vulnerable part of your inner thinking. It's so deep that it kind of will really test you with your anxieties that you would rather avoid letting others know. So in order to say, I know this sounds silly, means it takes quite a considerable amount of courage to go, I think this is silly. You'll probably think this is silly, but I'm willing to say it to you because actually I'm exposing myself as being vulnerable with this particular point. So I think when you're thinking about being judged, there is a big risk factor with this, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I regularly say, I don't mean sound stupid or no offense. Those are two things I say a lot because I'm like, I don't know how somebody else is going to take it. But when I say this is going to sound stupid, or like, I don't mean sound stupid, it's not because I think I sound stupid. I worry the other person's going to think I sound stupid.
Yes. But
so
then you're
it's not so much that
exposing
I'm
yourself.
like, oh, I sound like an idiot.
Yeah, but you're exposing yourself in that moment, aren't you? You're identifying that you feel really quite vulnerable from others. And when you think about our young person, and we need you to help us with this, when you go back to school and thinking about that, a lot of our young people are at school. The last thing they want to do is be more vulnerable when they already feel vulnerable. And if you condition yourself
Yeah.
to not saying a lot, to not conveying that you have issues, and let's face it, we have many brilliant, outstanding masters within the autistic community. Why would you make a judgment call of exposing yourself to look even worse, to feel even worse? You wouldn't.
Yeah, interestingly, when I was in school, if I had something that I felt like, if I say it's going to sound stupid, I can't seem to do it now, which is very interesting. It must have been the fact that I was in such an environment that I felt like, oh God, I really had to kind of police myself. Because I would say it if I knew people could make a joke out of it that I would be involved in. Because if I said, if in my brain I was like, if I say this out loud, people are going to make fun of me rather than make fun of it with me, then I won't say it. But if it's something that can kind of be like, you know, that silly moment in the classroom where everyone bursts out laughing, but you're laughing along with them, I didn't mind saying it. So I kind of had like these two levels of, can I actually say it or can I not say it?
Yeah.
And
I was
the
just
thing is,
thinking,
sometimes I don't say them aloud either, and I start laughing, and you say, "What are you laughing at? What's so funny?" And it's like, oh, well, I can't say it out loud because nobody else is going to find it funny. They're going to think she's off her rocker. She needs to be, you know, put somebody somewhere else. But I'm like, oh, that's so funny. I'm hilarious. I should have a stand-up show. You know, so yeah.
I was thinking as well, I've got one client who will always very quickly say something and then they'll immediately jump to, I'm joking, joking, joking. And you're like, you weren't. And somebody's put, the sounding silly seems to be tied to the thoughts you feel most insecure about. Interesting. Oh, good. So that is an element that happens, I think, quite a lot with our young people. When I was in a meeting many years ago, it was a professional meeting and it was supervision. And I remember not wanting to talk at depth about a particular problem. And I remember being pushed and coerced into identifying something. And it really exposed my vulnerability. And I suppose the horrible feedback from that was that, having been forced to kind of admit that I felt very vulnerable, that was then used against me months down the line. And you know, we do know that if we expose ourselves, we are at risk of being very vulnerable, and we already feel vulnerable. So, you know, when you identify that you do feel vulnerable, you're not exactly going to be pushing yourselves to kind of give away more information, are you? You're going to do anything but, aren't you?
Yeah, I also think when it gets to that kind of situation where it's very anxiety inducing, I then start worrying about other things. Like, for example, I'm already really anxious. So am I going to stumble on my sentence? Am I going to say a word wrong? Are people going to pick out, you know, I said lever rather than lever, whatever. And then I'm like, oh God, I've got so many things thinking about it. And it's just like, I can't deal with it.
Yeah. I think as well, the risk of not communicating goes up dramatically. You know how we think that, you know, there is a handful in comparison to the majority. So a minority who are self or situationally mute. But I think all of us have that element of literally shutting down where we just don't speak. And certainly when we start getting more and more anxious, our words tend to be more clipped. They tend to be smaller words. The sentences are shorter. They tend to be more a more anxious tone to it or angry tone to it. The volume might rise, it might fall. There's a lot going on that gives us a clue that something's not quite right. And unless you're very familiar with it, you might not get those clues. So if we're thinking about how we feel more worried, more vulnerable, and then we go mute, then it takes even longer for the recovery time to be able to start talking again or to start having longer sentences. When you're in that mode of thinking, internalizing, do you happen to know how long it takes you to kind of go through it, work through it, and then come out of it the other side? Have you ever noticed that?
On the lowest amount, I would say at least like 2 hours.
Yeah.
But regularly, I think the longest it's taken is about a week. You know, I think when it was really long, I think it didn't help that I had kind of outside influences, you know, and because I don't know about you, and again, this will be a perfect example of I don't mean to sound stupid, but did you ever, you know, try and change yourself when you were in like school, and you went full hog, but you weren't truly like, you know, you tried to almost put yourself in a role. Like, for example, I'm going to dress this way, I'm going to speak this way, I'm going to not use those words anymore. You know, like, for example, I know for a fact I swear quite a lot. I try really hard not to, but then you're so on edge going, I can't do this anymore because that's not who I want to be seen as, or I want to be this entire personality. I can't do those things anymore. So, you know, when I was going through this stuff, I was quiet for a couple of days because I was processing it. And then I was quiet for a bit longer because I thought, well, people seem to like me more when I'm not talking. So I thought, oh, okay, I try really, really hard to be this new person that people like, where I don't talk a lot, or, you know, I'm really quiet, I'm the shy one. And it's like, but that's not who I am, really. And so trying to force myself to, you are the shy one, you need to be quiet, you need to, you know, and then I'd have like an ADHD brain moment where people are having conversation, I'm like, oh, I've got to insert this right now because otherwise the conversation's going to change and we're going to move on and I've got a really clever thing to say and you're just going to leave me in the, you know. And then I was like, oh, for God's sake, I've just broken my rule of trying to be the quiet one. Well done.
Yeah. Thinking about the kind of like internalizing, I think part of my internalizing, particularly when I was your age, tended to be a lot after people had spoken to me. And I would often be doing a running commentary in my mind, you know, of all the things that you should have said, but never felt able to, or that you wanted to say to kind of put your point across, but you couldn't ever. And that's incredibly frustrating because, again, people can't hear that content, but it's quite clear that you are internalizing things with it. And the frustration that I was so useless, I couldn't defend myself or assert myself, or it didn't matter what came out of my mouth. Nobody really wanted to hear what I wanted to say. You know, played a big part on it for me.
Is that not normal? Because I feel like I regularly in my head, after I've gone to Tesco's or something and some guy has pulled a face at me and said I'm in the way, and I'm walking back to the car going, yeah, I should have said, no, you're in my way, mate, you're the issue. I don't say that, but in my head I'm like, I should have said that, I should have said them, and I should have given my famous glare and walked off, but I don't do that. Or like, you know, we have an argument and I'm in the shower the next day continuing the argument so I can go through all the bullet points of why I was right and you were wrong. And it's like, oh, apparently that's not normal. And I'm like, oh, you know, I saw a TikTok about it the other day when I finally managed to finish an argument without crying. And then she goes, her shampoo and conditioner bottles are giving her a round of applause. That's the thing. I'm like, so I finished them in my own time, and then I feel slightly better about it.
My mum used to say to me quite frequently, stop sulking. And I would be like,
you say that to me quite a lot.
Do I?
You know, yeah.
Not nearly anywhere near as much as my mother, trust me.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. When I was I still do it now, and I think you are getting slightly more understanding about it. If I've had a moment where, like, you know, the anxiety has got so much that I've blown up, and I'm like, I need to go to my room, and you'll come in and can you stop sulking in your room? Come downstairs, and the famous phrase that all parents seem to say, put a smile on your face and come join us downstairs. And I'm like, but I'm trying to remove myself from an environment because I'm either going to get angrier or I'm just really upset and I'm going to cry and I want to be in my own space. So it's like I either sit next to you and you tell me off for being angry and being in a mood, or I'm in my own space where I can have my own emotions and nobody's judging me. But then I also get told off for shutting myself up in my room, so I can't win. I don't understand. You know, especially sometimes it's like I don't even want to do anything. I just want to sit here and just let it evaporate. I don't want anyone in my space. I don't want to be judged, because I sometimes feel like as well, I pull faces when I'm processing things. You do it a lot. You're driving along and I go, are you okay? And you're like, yeah, why? And I'm like, your face does not show that you are okay. And then I ask you about 5 times in a row and I'm like, I'm getting really annoying now. I have to stop asking. But the face is giving me a, I'm not okay. Something's going on. And I'm like, but I can't look in your head and go, oh, that's what she's thinking about. And you always go, oh no, it's just work, or oh, you know, it's just something else. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to know, because your face is just really like, you look really upset, and you're always like, no, I'm just thinking about things. And I'm like, oh, misread it. You know.
I think as well, when we think about PDA, the assumption is that PDA is very explosive, it's very external. But there is a handful, again, of individuals who would rather run a million miles from externally showing their levels of anxiety. And invariably, they just shut down. It's just, you know, there's nothing. What they do instead is they internalize their anger. And as we know, anger is a very big camouflage for anxiety and or low mood. And it's very rare that it's just anxiety or it's just low mood. Predominantly, it's the combo. But when we're thinking about people internalizing their anger, whilst it may be possible for young people to, say, for example, being under, say, for example, the incontinence clinic, or, you know, perhaps eating disorder because they're doing lots of restrictive eatings. And these over time can become quite a problematic situation. It's more common when we think about people having ulcers, stomach ulcers, or stomach cramps, or IBS. And actually, it's interesting how this internalizing can have much bigger issues that we kind of didn't really consider. You know, internalizing is not exactly the best thing. And yet, the one thing that I know from you and I, when we're doing internalizing, is you're trying to make sense of it without sounding stupid to other people for the way we think. You know, for me, I only learned 5-6 years ago that I was autistic and was made to feel by my family members very stupid, and not capable, but not also to be included in family discussions, family events, because they didn't want to be associated with somebody like me. Now, obviously for you, although we were able, again, to learn 5-6 years ago that you were autistic, we did have a fighting chance with understanding about your dyslexia a lot longer before that. So we knew that things were going on for you, but that unwillingness to identify things was really quite interesting for you, because what I learned quite early on again was that you could hang on to information for years, and then it would suddenly just jet propel itself out of nowhere into, oh, this has been a long-standing worry. And you'd be like, really? Or you would say, oh, I thought everybody thought that. And you'd be like, really? How have I not known this? And when I know that that's happened to me personally, I can understand when some parents are completely baffled because their child has, you know, just like you did, identified something they've been thinking about years later. You're doing it now.
I unfortunately kind of think of the best way to explain it is it's almost like a long running version of, you know, when you're asleep and you suddenly wake up and you're like, where's my passport? It seems like a really random thought. That's why it's come up. But it's like that all the time. So it could be something from 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 weeks ago, you know, and it's like when you suddenly wake up and think, oh my God, where's my birth certificate? It just pops up and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about it now. I've got to deal with it. It's like, you know, and I have to be able to process it. But yeah, no, you talking about your family, oh God, just that gets me angry. I'm not a violent person, but when you're told, oh, you're as thick as two short planks, and you said for years, oh, when I graduate, I'm gonna send 2 short planks to a family member, and every time you said that, I'm like, you're thinking of it as a harmless joke. I'm thinking I'm going to grab those 2 short planks and I'm going to smack them with it because I get so angry. And so every time you mention this, you're like, yeah, I'm going to send it as a joke. And I'm like, I'm not joking. I want to smack somebody. Human pinata, let's go. You know, and that's the thing. That's what I find very interesting. We were talking about it a while ago, how we said I'm somebody who really finds loyalty. You have to be loyal. And I think of situations where I've been in and I've been too anxious or too nervous to say, I don't like how you're treating me. But when it comes to somebody I care about, I'm quite happy to get into a fist fight over it. But when it comes to my own issues, I won't say anything. I'll just, you know, that's okay because I've got your back, you've got mine. It's fine. You don't want to shout at people. I'll shout at them for you.
That's a very valid point, though, isn't it? Because how many of our young people at school feel that there is somebody who's looking out for them, somebody who's advocating? And I know the answer to this in that a lot of my reports say the same line over and over and over again. They don't have the trust of professionals within their school environment. And young people are very quick to learn when they haven't got people they can trust at school. Why would they want to subject themselves to further anxiety, further misery and trauma when in actual fact the people they trust implicitly to advocate for them are at home?
Yeah, I find with that as well, it's very easy to tell in school environments when the loyalty will not be returned.
Yeah.
That's the thing. At home, I mean, sometimes I think, or people in my domestic life, I'm like, I'm loyal to you and I think you're loyal to me, but I'm not sure if our loyalty is the same level. Whereas at school, I know for a fact I'm supposed to be very loyal to my teacher, to my form tutor. I've got to defend them, whatever, you know, I've got to listen to what they say, but it's not returned. And it irritates me immensely when teachers or professionals say it's a two-way street. And it's like, it's supposed to be, but for some weird reason, I've got roadworks on my side and I'm not allowed to go down this street. You're allowed to come down, but I'm not. So it's like, I'm looking at it, but it's not really a two-way street. And it irritates me so much, you know, because then they'll say things like, why didn't you come to me? I thought you could trust me. We're good friends, aren't we? We're mates, we're chummy, we can talk about this. And it's like, but I can't talk about it with you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't feel safe because you're either going to go and tell somebody or, you know, you're not going to take it seriously. And it gets so stressful that you end up, you know, getting really nauseous stomachs going, I don't want to go into school because I can't talk to anybody about it.
So if we're aware that internalizing actually has quite a level of anxiety, how would we know what clues to look for then with internalizing? I mean, have you got any ideas? Like, you've already said to me that you think my face tells a lot of information in, you know, she's not happy. I don't know. I mean, do I look anxious? Do I look upset? Do I look angry?
You look upset.
Upset. Okay, so I look upset.
Or angry, but I wouldn't say like angry like you're gonna start shouting. It's more like angry you're gonna start crying because you're so frustrated about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I for years said to you as well, you know, when you're thinking, you go gormless, you go away with the fairies, it's gone. There is nothing going on here. So, and I don't know if everyone can see that or if I can see that, because I don't watch people, but I get used to kind of their behaviors. So when it's different, because you literally look like a PC that's gone to sleep and it's just, I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen Stranger Things, but Chrissy, wake up, gone, bye. you know, and it's like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, are you okay? And you snap out of it and go, yeah, I'm fine. Why? And I'm like, you were gone. You weren't in this room. You were having an out-of-body experience. You know? And you're always like, why do you say I look gormless? And it's like, because you do. There is nothing going on there. I wouldn't even say the light's on and nobody home. The whole house is shut up. There's no other way to describe it.
So because I'm thinking, I mean, I wouldn't say you were gormless when I see you.
I don't do it. I don't do it. I know I don't do it.
But you have you do have a blank expression, and unlike me, you will not be drawn. You will not be coerced. You know, it's like, you know, basically the whole world can blow up as far as you're concerned. You're still not going to be talking, and quite clearly you should be a spy, because, you know, they could do everything to you and you still wouldn't confess.
Yeah, but I find that really interesting, you know, because I would agree with you with that. You know, I wouldn't tell people, but I tell you everything. Even when I try and hold it, even when I try and hold it back, I end up looking at you, and it's almost like there's a look on your face or something, and then I end up saying something, and I'm like, oh, I wasn't gonna tell her that, for God's sake. I've just told you, and I'm like,
if you won't be drawn on it
at that point, I can't take it back.
But if you won't be drawn on it, there is no way.
I'm in that situation, yeah, but it'll normally come up later. But
yeah,
the thing is, I don't know, when you zone out, I don't know what you're looking at, if that makes sense. Whereas I know for a fact when I zone out, it's not a black screen. It's more like when a camera goes out of focus. Like, I can still see everything going on around me, but it's slightly fuzzy. It's sometimes like when you try and concentrate on your nose, you know, your vision kind of goes a bit fuzzy. You can still see things and you can see what you're looking at, but everything else, you know, whereas I don't know what you see, because I feel like you just don't see anything. You're gone, you know? So I don't know. Can you still, I mean, I don't want to say, do your eyes still work? But do your eyes still work? Because it's almost like you're just gone. You have plugged out. You are gone. You know? So I
think in those moments, I am very much in my own world, and it feels like to me that my voice is so loud in my head, I can't hear anything else, I can't see anything else, because I'm so busy thinking about it. The other time I experience this is when I am very deeply involved in a piece of research or a report, and I'm in the zone and I'm really thinking about it, and then, you know, you'll either knock on the door or the phone will interrupt me, and I literally feel as if I have to pull myself back from it to go, where am I? What am I doing? Oh yeah. Oh, the phone's rung. Oh, somebody's at the door. And it's it's a common question that I ask in screening, particularly with ADHD and autism, and it's a really interesting viewpoint because nobody writes what it looks like, do they? They just ask you the question, does your child experience being distracted externally and internally? Nobody says, what does that look like? So you have to go by what you do. And if you're an autistic parent, you might have a fighting chance of getting it because you recognize it. But if you're not an autistic parent, that might be quite challenging. But yeah, I would say, perhaps I'm pretending that nobody's at home, Yasmin, so I don't get interrupted. How about that? I mean, would that follow through?
Even if I imagine myself in pretend situations, I'm very here.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of the same psychological question as do you have a running commentary in your head or not? Some people have absolutely nothing going on up there. Some people only have images. Some people only have noise. Some people have all three. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not. That's the thing. It isn't written down. So sometimes, even now, as an autistic person, I go through things or I experience something, and I don't know how to ask somebody, what does that feel like? Because we covered this months ago. I did a blog post on about, I don't know if I've actually ever felt love. Like, don't get me wrong, I like things and I intensely like things, but I don't know if I can associate myself with the word love because I don't think I felt it. But at the same time, what does love feel like? Somebody can't give me an example. They can't bottle it up and sell it to me and go, take a sip of this, you will feel it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I know what I'm looking for now. So I'm kind of going off what people say, because you regularly say, oh yeah, but you love chocolate. And I'm like, no, I don't. I just really like it. I wouldn't say I love it, but I don't know if maybe I've been in a world too long where I kind of expect, I mean, I'm a realistic person, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I think media hasn't, like TV shows, songs, movies, hasn't shown me love like the way I like chocolate. So I wouldn't class it as love. And I'm not saying
right. Maybe we should try somebody like Mick Schumacher. She's frozen. Just when we get to the pivotal point that I want to know the answer. So I guess what we need to think about is internalizing. Is it an issue or is it not? And oh, you're back. Can you hear me? Are you back, Yasmin?
Am I back? Are you back? I felt like that was you who went, not me. I'm just looking at a loading screen.
Yeah, we were fine, thanks.
Oh, right, it's just me then, is it?
So I was thinking, if you really wanted to know about love, maybe we should not ask about chocolate. Maybe we should ask about Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's love or I just really like him, That's
the thing that I was just about to ask was, is this an issue? If we're discussing it at length today, but is it an issue for people or is it not? Is it just something that they just want to understand so that they can either support or help? Somebody's put a comment. Let me just get my glasses on. Yeah. Okay. So I guess that
realizing the issue of hiding the distress.
I think that's the bit there, isn't it? How do we know if it's inner distress? And if we've used Yasmin's example of where I've just literally shut down and nobody's at home, I've shown that there are two things about that. One is I could be having a very in-depth sort of thinking process about it, but it's not distressing. And equally, there are times when clearly it is very distressing, but I won't be drawn on it. I'll just simply say, oh, it's about work, or it's about a project, or it's about whatever. If it's an inner distress, are we assuming then that it's impacting on other areas? I guess it is. But again, it's finding out what it is. And the annoying thing I know, that particularly with Yasmin, was that when she was younger, you could not get her to tell you what it was. And that could be very frustrating, because I remember there was one particular situation where she identified it, but it happened 3-4 years earlier, and we couldn't really remember that level of distress that had been causing. But obviously it was free to come out at the time it did, but there was nothing we could do about it. And yet clearly she had been struggling with something but couldn't articulate it. I guess as well, if we're thinking about how to support, it's trying to provide that environment, isn't it? So that you don't need to talk about it, you just need to know that you're supported.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. But going back to the comment about inner distress, I don't know, maybe distressed, when I hear the word distressed, I have images in my brain of what distressed is. And I'm not always like that. You know, sometimes it is like a long zone out. And sometimes I'm just thinking about other things. You know, it's not always distressing, because distressing makes me think I'm going to start hyperventilating and I'm scared. There's like a scared anxiety. It's not like a nervous anxiety or like an excitement anxiety. It's scared. It almost makes me feels like a child who's woken up from a nightmare, like where you're really on edge. And I'm not like that all the time. Sometimes it is just I'm away with fairies and I'm thinking about other things, and I'm thinking about what I need to write recently, or a TV show where I unfortunately sometimes insert myself into TV show situations going, oh yeah. And it's not always scary or violent or, you know, whatever. It just happens. And that's what you were saying about was if you could stop it. I don't think there is any way to stop it, because it's not always negative. It's not like if I go to therapy, it's going to stop. Because it just happens. So I like being able to know how I can help myself when it is a distressed reason that I'm having this. But when it's just a happy thing, I don't need help so much with that, because that's a positive thing. You want to keep that one. You just need help with the slightly negative, slightly scarier bits of it, you know?
So let me take you back then to school time, because school obviously is very helpful as a vehicle in thinking. The times that you didn't want to go to school and you would take longer to get up, get sorted with breakfast, get dressed, all of those were opportunities where you would have been internalizing, and you would not have conveyed in any way that you were struggling. It was literally by what you were doing or not doing that gave me the clues that this morning was going to be a tough morning. Now, I know that lots of parents relay that difficulty because they can see it. The children are struggling.
I can promise you, if your child is doing that, we are taking each step of our routine as slowly as possible, because in my brain, all I was thinking is, if I don't pick up my toothbrush and brush my teeth, can't go, you know? So everything that I was doing that was routine that you can normally do in like 5 minutes, I was trying to extend to the point that I could find a reason to stop me from doing whatever it was, you know, going to whatever. I can't find my school shoes. I can't find my maths book, and I've got a maths test today. All of these little things, I could have gone to school and I would have got slightly told off by my teacher. But to me, that was a good enough reason as to the day cannot go ahead. I cannot leave the house, you know.
I was thinking as well,
really
when I was working
it's a lot like our... Oh, God.
No. I was just thinking about when I was the staff nurse in on a unit, we had a patient who was staying with us, and I remember constantly staff moaning because you could go into the dormitory and he would be standing there motionless and quite clearly was internalizing things. And it took a lot of medication to be tweaked to get it right. But he said that he was constantly unable to think, because in that moment of anxiety, he was having to think through every single step. And what I mean by that is take a breath. Okay, I've taken a breath. Now what? And literally looking around him to go, what was I doing again? Oh yeah, I was getting dressed. What next? Take a breath. Now, to the outside of you, nobody is aware. It just looks like you're in that room doing very little. And I know that one of the things that I come across quite often with everybody is that quite often when we talk about having a foggy head, I can't think clearly. And when we're consumed by high levels of anxiety, we can't think straight. You have to kind of really ground yourself. You know, some people will grip their hands, some people will rock on the floor, some people will sit in the chair but keep moving just so that they're feeling that they are touching base, you know, with the real world, but they are still trying to get a clarity of thinking so that they can then move to the next level. And actually that's quite distressing, because if in that moment you can't, you know, you can't get through, you can see the turmoil that's going on, but you can't actually do anything about it because you don't know what the thought contents are about. So that's a different angle, isn't it?
See, I think that actually circles, yeah, but that circles us perfectly around to the start. So when I was doing NCS for a while, we had to do this project. Yeah. And it was getting to the end of the day and I was getting very stressed. And at this point, we had an inkling I was autistic, but it still wasn't like we told other people about it. And I was in a group of other kids my age, but I seemed to laugh with all the popular people, which would never happen in life, bullied. And we were brave. And I was going out of it. I know I was. And I got asked a question and I said, I can't answer that right now. My brain is all white. It's like a whiteboard. There is nothing I can't do. And I was like, oh, good for you. You've been able to vocalize it, that you cannot do anything right now. There is no thoughts going in. There is nothing. And all I had was the lead board turn to me and tut at me and then asked the next person while he stood there with a massive whiteboard writing down on the pen. And he went, whatever name. What about you? And don't give me a stupid answer like, you can't see anything, it's just white. And I was like, oh, I thought I did really well at telling people nothing's going on up there, you know? But then everyone who thought I was using it as an excuse. And obviously it wasn't an excuse. And they were all making fun of me for it. So then I got really anxious thinking, well, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home because I know I'm getting to the point where I'm not going to be able to function for much longer. It's lucky that they managed to get that out of me.
Yeah.
You know? But they were making fun of me for it. And I was very aware that they were making fun of me for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not a comfortable, but that's not a comfortable feeling, is it? And why would you want to express again that level of vulnerability, isn't it? You know, you're trying to encourage yourself to be able to convey to people why you're struggling. and then it's just, you know, dismissed.
I mean, at the time, I was really, really upset about it because I was like, you can't stop yourself from kind of zoning out, but everyone's watching you to try and catch you as if you're being lazy. And it's like, I'm not being lazy. But now I'm thinking about it, I'm upset about it. I'm angry that these people thought it was okay to make fun of me. But also at the same time, why should I be insulted by somebody named after a home accessory? I'm not doing it. You know, it's like when somebody bullied me at school and they were named after a Mexican dip. Why am I going to be insulted by these people? It's like, you know, now I'm looking back at it going, come on. You know, I and that comes with time. That does come with time. I mean, I'm still upset about it. Still get a bit anxious about it. But I'm able to kind of remove myself from the situation and go, you know what? Jog on. It, you know.
So I was writing a report a few weeks back, and I had a young person, and it was a young person, a very young person, who the social worker went into school to observe. And the young person kept having blinking episodes where their eyes widened, and it's that gormless expression, isn't it? That, you know, internalizing for sure. But they, the teacher hadn't noticed as the same way. What they said was, oh yeah, they frequently do that, but they were just blinking. And the social worker said, well, you haven't had the luxury I have of watching this young person, and actually there's nothing going on there. It's all internal. So I think perhaps there is that element of you're thinking deeply, but also there is that more worrying undertone, is there not, around the levels of anxiety, you know, which is concerning, and we do need to be mindful of. Yasmin's frozen again. You know, and so it's important that we kind of just monitor these situations. Are you back now? Are you back, Yasmin? No, she's gone. It's important that we do monitor these situations, because actually it's another indicator around stress or potentially distress, and yet more evidence to support why they need to be monitored, because of course everything adds as evidence, and it's certainly something that would be useful to give a more full rounded picture to help your young person's case. You're back. You keep going.
Back. Sorry about that.
It's okay. So I was just saying that it's important that we do monitor young.
I heard some of that, yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Are there any pointers that you wanted? Sorry, are there any pointers that you wanted to kind of highlight that we needed to consider?
Not really. I think I've kind of covered, you know, again, parents know their children better than anyone else. And when you're older and you're kind of going through it, you can slightly, maybe preemptively tell people, hey, look, if I zone out for a minute, just leave me. But I was just thinking about you saying that the teacher thought that the child was blinking. All I can automatically think of is when, and I snapped out of it, and I automatically blamed it on I was just blinking, because I was like, if I say I wasn't in the room, sorry about that, could you just say it again? They're going to be like, oh, you're being lazy. And it's like, no, I'm not being lazy. I just zoned out for a minute. Sorry. So you always just go, oh, no, I was just blinking, or, oh, I'm just tired. You would always try and blame it on something else to not draw to yourself.
Yeah. I think the monitoring, once you become aware of it, is quite important, but also trying to find an area and a time regularly that you can support the venting. Because if you don't have a safe place to vent or to talk about things, you end up bottling it, don't you?
Yeah, I would also say the one thing I would recommend is actually for parents, don't say, oh, my kid just shuts themselves up in their room because they're a teenager. It's normally because we want an environment where we can do that and not feel like people are looking at us. And I know that's probably a very hard pill to swallow because sometimes we are just being teenagers who want to be in our rooms. But when we're in that situation, it's very, very annoying when you keep coming into the room and going, stop being in this mood, or come and join us. We're all downstairs. Are you coming downstairs for dinner? And it's like, can you just let me get this out without interrupting? It's like trying to watch a TV show with adverts in between. I can't get through the drama with, a Deliveroo advert. I just can't do it. And it sounds really bad, but we just need this space, and I can't. If you'd left me to do it, I'll probably come and join you sooner than if you keep interrupting me. It just it does sound a bit harsh, but I mean it in the best way possible. It's probably just easier to leave them alone for a bit, and they'll come down when they're ready, or they'll rejoin when they're ready. I
think the main thing thinking about internalizing is that clearly we have a knack or a way that we do it that isn't necessarily the same as everybody else. So it does really lend itself to parents kind of making notes, really, taking the observations and kind of just monitoring it to kind of find a right way of doing things and allowing the opportunities to be there to talk about things. And when we know that people say, like you said, if I ask a question, do we need to respond with the question so that you have an opportunity to talk? Or when somebody says, I know this sounds really silly, but I need to tell you, allowing that person to feel very safe, it's okay to disclose it.
Yeah, especially with if they say something like, oh, I don't mean to sound stupid, or I don't mean to sound silly, hold your judgment back until they've finished. Because if they finish and they start like chuckling to themselves, thinking, yeah, that was a pretty silly idea, you can laugh along, that's fine. But if you start laughing and like they're just not going to say anything, so it's like just have a bit of a delay with your reaction, because if it's funny and like everyone can laugh along, that's fine, that's great, that's that really makes it less stressful for everybody, because you're not thinking, oh god, have I just messed up this conversation because I've said something, or have I been too honest? That really does help, because I can think of loads of times that I've said something and it's come out with a question like that, but we've ended up having a really funny conversation afterwards, or laughing a lot, and that makes me feel so much better about it.
Yeah. Okay, what do you want to explore next week? Is there anything hot off the press that we should be exploring next week?
We haven't got anything for a couple of weeks now. I think so the next national holiday is. Oh no, I tell a lie. It's Armed Forces Day on the 25th.
Is it?
I think.
Okay.
Was that last
of July?
I can't remember at this point. But yeah.
Okay. Well,
and then after that we're fine until the second day.
Worst case scenarios, we can always put it to poll and ask people what they would like to explore next week, which is always really helpful, because then we're kind of keeping on top of what our community wants to explore, can't we? So we're going to wrap it up today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. We've been talking about internalizing on the M Word Unearthing program. If you would like to know more information, you're very welcome to email us on info@the-m-word. So that's the-m-word cic.co.uk, or you can always have a chat with John on 0792 08232 if you want to talk about coming in for mental health assessment or initial screening or therapy or the expert parent program. But in the meantime, I think what we might do is put a question to poll and see what you would like us to do. Thank you for doing that, Yasmin. And we will see you next week, same time at 12:15 for Unearthing. Have a good week, everybody. See you soon. Bye now.